Okay. Okay, I want to call the Finance Committee meeting of Wednesday, June 28, 2017 at 9 a.m. together. Mr. Johnson could not be here today, so as Vice Chairman, I will take his place. Many of you may remember, no, that's a roll call. Oh.
Mr. Johnson. Mr. Legess.
Present.
Mr. Washington.
Present.
Mr. Vickery. Mr. Hess. Mr. Mulcahy. Mr. Scott. Mr. Seroy.
Present.
Mr. Hildebrand. Mr. Einfeld. Ms. Weber. Mr. Payton. Mr. Ritter. Mr. Wheeler.
Present.
Mr. Lear. We have a quorum.
Thank you. That's still on. I did not receive any public comment. Is there any public comment? Okay. We have no presentations. Or are you going to do that? You're not doing that now, Andy, are you? Okay. I'll need a motion and a second to approve the minutes of May 24, 2017. Mr. Seroy, second by Mr. Washington. I have a voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. County Auditor Jake Lee. Can I do that now? Motion to motion. I can do that. I'll need a motion to approve the monthly claims. And a second, Mr. Payton with a motion, Mr. Hess with a second. We'll have a roll call, please.
Mr. Legess.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Ms. Weber. Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Auditor's update. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. It is that time of year again by which we submit our quarterly report. And as I had indicated last month, I would have it prepared for you. I also have this available if you'd like to have me email it. That's not a problem. I can email the information as well. I thought we'd go in a little bit different direction because I've gotten a lot of questions about what we're responsible for. And I get those questions when I'm out in the community, town hall meetings or other presentations I do. And so I wanted to just kind of remind everyone what I found out via my own research and also from the Conference Association, which I'm glad to be a part of as well. Before I go there to this report, though, are there any questions on the claims report that I can entertain? It's pretty straightforward. There wasn't anything significant this past May with the claims. So, but if there are any questions, okay. All right, so the quarterly report. We all know that state statute requires us to report quarterly to the county board several things. And so I'd like to just kind of, next slide please, go to some of the this is the scope of the quarterly report, if I could call your attention to the screen. We're supposed to report on the entire financial operations of the county. And that includes revenues anticipated and received, expenditures estimated and paid. So this is things that has actually taken place and things that are projected to take place, obligations unpaid, and conditions of all funds and other pertinent information. The ones I have in bold are things that the auditor's office at the point in which we generate this report may or may not be aware of, because a lot of the projections and the obligations unpaid, things like that, rests with the finance department. And so some of this stuff may not be as current as possible. So I just want to let you know that even though it's statutorily required, we just do the best we can with our projections based on the information we have. So next slide, please. All right, so the criteria for the auditor, a lot of people don't realize that this is an Article 7, Section 4, Constitutional Office, as the other countywides are, it's regulated by statute established 55 ILCS 5/3-3-1001. The criteria is that you must have 75,000 people in your county as a minimum. So between 75 and 3 million, that establishes the Office of Auditor. The counties then, once they meet that criteria, and of course, you know, the reason there's so few auditors is most of your counties in Illinois, approximately 3/4 of them are not at 75,000. We've got 102 counties and most of them are pretty small. But Kankakee County is about 110,000. So therefore the Office of Auditor was established. Next slide, please. So our duties are outlined vis-a-vis the statute as well, and I've got the reference there for you. A lot of this stuff, I found out by my own research, and as I see this, I like to communicate with people so they know what questions to ask me and what kind of information I am not only obligated by law, but morally obligated to give them as it relates to accountability and transparency. So one of the first things we're supposed to do is audit all claims against the county and recommend to the county board the payment or rejection of all claims presented. Now, this is one that kind of gets people confused because the auditor doesn't unilaterally decide what happens and what doesn't happen. We recommend to this body, who then recommends to the full board if necessary or whatever, what gets paid and what doesn't. We are not looking for any kind of unilateral authority, but I just want to make sure that people know that we are looking at those claims. There's a ton of claims that come through, and we have our process of what we verify. And not last month, which I'll report on next month, had a lot of issues with claims that we're trying to work through with the claims not being signed by the department head, which means they're not authorized. They're being charged to the wrong lines, different things like that. So we're working on those. Next slide, please. Collecting, analyzing, and preserving statistical and financial information. A lot of this information already exists with our Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, CAFR for short. And so we try to not duplicate efforts because that's not a good use of tax dollars, right? And since the finance department generates most of that information anyway, we just try and kind of pigtail off of that. Maintain a file of all contracts entered into by the county board and any authorized county officers on behalf of the county. That has not been done, as far as we can tell, ever by this office. And so we are changing that. I'm working with the county clerk, Mr. Bruce Clark, to kind of have a cooperative, because the county clerk will have all those contracts and resolutions that follow, et cetera. And so we're working on getting into compliance in this area so that if something comes up, we know where to go for that information. We'll take a look at it, because further in the statute, next slide, please. It'll tell us, it's actually after this one, but I'll hit the bottom one first. Further in the slides, it'll tell us that we're supposed to look at the basis for which things that are charged to the county are. So one of the discussions that came up is the prevailing wage discussion. And that's something that our office is charged to look at and determine whether or not we're doing business with companies that are in compliance and so forth. That's, analyzing the basis of what's charged to the county. Audit all receipts. That's basically cash that's brought in. There are statutes, like we're working with Sandy, our circuit clerk, to establish processes by which we are testing and auditing her funds, particularly the cash funds, and looking at some of those things. Next slide, please. This is the maintaining the internal audit, the continuous internal audit of operations and financial records. My counterparts across the state have at the training, one of the things they said is they get a lot of mileage for the productivity audits they do. Now, I tend to look at it as being a neighborhood consultant to our other elected officials and department heads. I'm not in the business of trying to tell someone how to run their office. They know how to run it, and the statute gives them internal controls. But there are some things that as you work together and you kind of look at different processes and procedures, you'll discover that there's a better way. I'm of the philosophy that there's always a better way. It's up to us to discover what that better way is. And so we're supposed to do that. And the auditor, of course, shall have access to all records, documents, and resources necessary for this discharge. It has been one of the things that people have been very cooperative with me, and I'm very appreciative of that. But as I try to answer questions with the public, they just wonder, well, how do you get this information? I'm like, well, we by statute shall have that access. It's not optional. So audit the documentation records and the basis. That's what I was talking about earlier. Next slide, please. And these are a few statutory obligations that currently do not reside in the auditor's office. One is in counties under 275,000. We're to be the general accountant of the county, basically the comptroller, and keeps its general accounts. Number two, appoint deputies and employees. We only have one in the auditor's office right now due to budgetary cuts to the office. And the bottom one is one that I'm working on. The association gives us continuing education for which is required by statute, a minimum of 20 hours. I am actually pursuing an additional degree on top of my MBA to hopefully satisfy this exponentially. But there's an issue. I'm not sure where the cross is yet in terms of another degree fulfilling this particular obligation. So I've got the association's counsel looking into that for me, because my goal is that the county would possibly save some money by me using benefits that I earned when I was in the United States Navy to go to school and fulfill this obligation, as opposed to charging my association costs to the county. So I'm working on that, and that'll be one way in which we can save money. And I hope to be able to do that next year. Next slide, please. Now we're going to get into the financials. This is a little busy. I get that, and it's a little hard to see. But this is basically a 10-year fiscal comparison, and I like charts and graphs, so that's why I have them up there. And basically what this data tells you is that from pretty much since FY 12, we're looking at there all the way through FY 15, expenses have exceeded revenue. And I've got in the middle the percentage change. And again, I can provide in the quarterly report that's emailed out where the link is. This is part of that, and it's much easier to see and much cleaner. But we've got the percentage change between the years, because I think it's important. If you're going to trend data, you want to know, how did it change from last year to the year before? And so that's what we try to do here. The projections that I have, because remember, we're supposed to report on estimated and actuals, are basically revenue is a percentage increase based on a 4-year rolling average is basically what that is. And then expenditures, I project those based off of the CPI. You'll see in the next couple of slides that our current expenditures year to date have increased relative to last year by about 1.83%. The CPI, the rolling 12-month consumer price index, is 1.89. And so that's how I index my expenditures when it comes to my projections. And you'll see that shows, if we push that out 5 years, we'll see that the general fund will come to zero, and this is all an estimation, sometime after the year 2022. So that's significant, so we're that's what this information basically represents. Next slide, please. So here I do two things with this information. This is just the general fund, and again, I estimate quarters 3 and 4. Because that hasn't taken place yet. This is only through May 31st of 2017. So this is only quarter 1 and quarter 2 represented in this data of FY17. FY16 and before is all actuals. So the percentage changes that you see, or excuse me, the revenue versus expenditures that you see is all actual. And you see how in FY16, we were about $20,000 in the black. You see that 1979. FY17, we're projecting to be at about $1,029,000. And that sounds exciting, right? Revenues will exceed expenses in the general fund, but that money is already spoken for. The chairman will tell you, and I'm sure Steve McCarty will tell you that we've already got obligations for that. And it's been indicated to me that we're paying back the highway department $1.1 million. You know, we still have, obviously, beyond that, 3.4 that we owe them. We've got a lot of obligations that we have to meet, not to mention the cash situation. So even though we're projecting for revenues to exceed expenditures this year, that money is already accounted for. And it would be our recommendation, of course, that anything that is extra, quote unquote, is used for debt reduction and the interfund borrowing that you know I hate so much. And then, of course, we project out 18 through 22 is all speculation based on the criteria I told you before. But we do see revenue exceeding expenses based on our index and based on the data that's available to us. So that's exciting to see that trend go up the other direction. Next slide, please. In this slide, we represent the data in thousands. A lot of businesses do this because it's easier to, I don't know about you, but I got a hard time, bringing down to other people millions of dollars in terms that are meaningful for them. But most of us, can understand thousands pretty easily. The nice thing about it is the percentages don't change. The percentages are the same because it's a relative ratio. But it's easier to identify, okay, that makes sense. We're at 27,642, 28,000, et cetera. So this is the exact same information on the slide before, but I represent the data in thousands just so that if you hand it to someone it's really easy to translate that for them, because most people aren't financial people. I was speaking to a group yesterday, a small group, and they said, well, I don't know about all this money stuff. And I'm like, well, that's okay. That's why you elected me. So we'll get it straight. Next slide, please. This is where, we could probably get a little excited with the, quote, light at the end of the tunnel. How you get this information is basically you take the revenue over expenses, hopefully, and you add it to the existing fund balance, and hopefully it will reduce the existing fund balance if it's in the negative, like the general fund. If it's positive, you want it to increase it. And so in my last quarterly report, I had mentioned we need $1 million between general, pension, and tort. And people are like, well, what does that mean? This and that. And I said, well, I should probably explain that a little bit better. And so I just pulled the data, and again, with it all pulls from for FY, the end of 17, 18, and beyond, all pulls from revenues and expenses that I have indexed using the forecasting models that I like from business school. And that's the representation you see, and it all reflects the same representation that we see in our CAFR up to 2017. In 17, the blue is the general fund, and you see how the bottom fell out, and then there's the upwards trend. That's because we're projecting each year to reduce the negative fund balance of the general fund if all things remain equal. If we go on spending splurges, or if we have lawsuits, or if we have any kind of issues that hits these funds in a negative way, all of this becomes irrelevant, and it's going to look much different. But as you can see, it is exciting to see the trend with tort in the red, and pension is in the green. And this is all based on what I know, and I just use average indexing models for the revenue side, and on the expense side, I use the consumer price index. So, and our numbers are very close to the consumer price index. It's only a 0.06% difference. So it's really close. So I think that's a good model. the next step I want to do, which isn't included in this presentation, is I'll put together a kind of a quarterly control chart, if you will, so that you can really see how are these years deviating from each other, and what is the trend like over time? What's causing those trends? For example, the early tax distribution skewed the revenue numbers. And so you have to pull that out and then do your calculation. Otherwise, you end up overstating revenue. One of the problems that I've noticed, and this is just my opinion, that I've noticed as I've studied our finances, is that we have a habit of overstating revenue and understating expenses. And so that creates a cash crisis. So using data that is really as close as you could possibly get, perhaps arguably, you may be able to avoid some of the cash crises that we see. Not all of them. There's no doubt we're going to have to interfund borrow for some time because of the situation we're in. But this data was encouraging to me as I kind of analyzed it to see that things are going in an upwards direction. So that's exciting. Next slide, please. I think, okay. One of the things that Mr. Vickery, I'm glad he's here, and I got your printed packet for you, is he wanted to see the performance of departments. And so this is the revenue side. The far right column is the percentage change between 2016 and 17, and then the totals at the bottom. We're up 17.61% on the revenue side. That is very encouraging for quarter two. Again, this ends May 31st, 2017. That is very encouraging. This will not be a normal trend. Things happening with the Department of Homeland Security, with our county sheriff, is a major driver in that number. So that's not going to continue at 17%. You don't grow at that rate, okay? But it is encouraging to see that based on the data we have, that's what we're seeing by department. Increase in fees, we're starting to see that show up and be represented in our revenue numbers. So that is very exciting. Next slide, please. This will show you expenses. It's a little hard to see because there's more expense departments, right? Than revenue departments. And that's where I got my 1.83, down bottom right-hand corner. Expenses relative to last year, the increase is 1.83, which makes sense, again, because the CPI is 1.89. Now, we're trending a little less than the CPI, which is exciting. That means we're holding the line on expenses. But I expect, at a minimum, expenses to continue to increase at the CPI or this number. I use the higher number with expenses because, again, I think it's more advantageous for us to get a good financial picture is to, I'd rather overstate expenses than understate them. So, because then if we end up with more money than we thought we would have, we could do some debt reduction or, limit our interfund borrowing, which, again, I don't like. But anyway, this is how departments are performing. Next slide. This is the one that most people are interested in. Now, these numbers, I have to qualify three things. Number one, they're based on last year's budget, which was $24.7 million, I believe. So if you look at 68 or 69% of the departments are tracking to be over budget relative to last year's budget. So this goes to the conversation of the budget amendments that I believe will take place later on this morning. This is what we see in terms of how we are trending. The auditor's office, I have asterisk because it shows us at about 100%. That's skewed because of the way we deal with credit cards. Credit cards all fall into a line, 99,550 in the auditor's budget. And then they are farmed out to the respective departments. So we are tracking the $105,000 that was budgeted to the auditor's office. We won't be able to stay within that. That is just not going to happen. It didn't happen last year. I don't see any way we can do that, just based on labor alone. But we're going to do the best we can to make sure that there's not a huge increase over that 105. And then hopefully next year we can look at some of the data and allow it to speak to us as it relates to some of this stuff. And then you see once we adjust, like the 24.3, excuse me, that was the budget, 24.3 million, not 24.7. When we adjust the numbers, you'll kind of see that a lot of people will then, like my quarter 3 report, will probably look much better. Because I would assume that any contingencies, anything that has to do with budgetary adjustments, et cetera, will be reflected at that point, and then this slide will look much different. So again, these are mainly projections. I know I went through the data quite quickly, but hopefully you'll be confident in the fact that we do use kind of scientific methods, as it were, when we calculate this stuff, and I say the auditor's office, so that you can have confidence in the data that comes with these reports. So are there any questions at all that I can entertain? Well,
Mr. Vickery, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, what categories are the increase in revenue? Where are we getting the increase in revenue?
Okay, so the increases in revenue, if you look, so just to walk through that slide, some of the lines that fall under administration, that data has like a 40% increase. The assessment office, 23.45% increase in revenue. And I'll just skip through a few of them. Corrections, there's a 30.9% increase in revenue. The circuit clerk, 3.2. So there's several lines here. Maintenance and child support, that one doubled. But some of these percentages are they seem astronomical, but the dollar amount is not very big. With corrections, that's a big dollar amount and a big percentage, for example. So that's where the revenue increases are coming from on that page there.
So is it basically fees and corrections?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
That's the majority. Yes.
Anybody else? I had a question, Jake. How do you treat in your projections? How do you treat probably our 2 biggest expense, union contracts and health insurance? Just historically go by a percentage that's been increased in the past?
Yes, okay. And and I just assume it's going to increase by a minimum by the CPI as well.
Okay, Steve?
Jake, I didn't hear you mention that this is on a cash basis. So we're susceptible in the quarterly reports to the timing of state payments and outside payments. So year to year, quarterly reports can look different because it's strictly a timing issue. So that's when you talk about the assessor office, if you're talking about grant and aid payments. Last year, apparently we didn't get them before May 31st. This year we did. So the board needs to understand on the cash basis of the quarterly that it's really a timing issue. When you go projecting out, then you take everything and plug it all in. So that can skew year to year when timing of things happen, and that's the same in the expense as well. When with the lack of help in getting it in the system, and when that timing happens, that's just a workflow issue, and sometimes that may skew it from year to year, and for no other reason, just from a workflow issue and when everything hits the system. So just want to make sure we are clear for a cash basis and what's in the system and what the system is spitting out at a certain period of time.
Thanks, Steve. You got ahead of me because that was something I was going to mention, but thank you for mentioning that. Finally, we have the compensation report. I don't have it up here yet because there are a couple of discrepancies that Joanne and I are working through as it relates to how that information is gleaned. But basically what has to happen that Chairman Wheeler and I had discussed in the past is we haven't been in compliance with posting that report, which what we're supposed to do is post the total compensation, and that includes, IMRF, that includes healthcare, et cetera, and it has to be names of individuals who are paid. It cannot be titles or job descriptions. But in conversations, we have decided that it's best to, for safety reasons, remove job descriptions and departments, put the names so that we're in compliance, and then just alphabetize them. And then we're combining a couple of sections so that people can't, if they've got any level of analytical ability, they can't kind of piece it together and find out who people are and, their families and things like that. So there will be more to follow on that. We are working through those discrepancies, and hopefully we'll see that report going up. We did a little sample size. Every county that has an auditor, 14 of the 14 that we looked at, all have this report in some form or fashion. And we did about 12 counties that do not have auditors. They have that report. The other requirement is that you have steps as to how people can access this information. What people are paid, as we all know, is public information. There's public dollars that go to our compensation. And so in order to be in compliance, we're going to post this information to the auditor's website once we're confident that it is precise, it's accurate, and that what we reflect here is what is reflected in reality. So there'll be more to follow on that. I do thank you for your time. If there's no other questions, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jake. Very informative. Okay, thanks, Jake. That was very informative. I'm sure all of us will agree. Insurance? We have nothing, or just you?
Basically, looks like Lynn has provided the staffing report for everybody to look over. I'm not prepared to answer any questions about that at this time. So turn his mic off. But yeah, if you have any, shoot an email to Lynn. I believe she's off today with taking care of some personal business. Correct. She'll be back Monday. So yeah, with that being said, moving on to the cyber insurance policy. This is something we've talked about in the past. Currently, our health department has one of these. They're required to, I believe, because of some grants that they get. And the subject came up as we were looking through this to procure cyber insurance with the hacks that have gone on, the attempted ransomware that we had here, the semi-success of that, even though we didn't necessarily play ball. We didn't have to. We had backups. But the thought process is, on my part, is that since the health department has to do it anyway, why not look at the cost of an umbrella policy for all of the county? And then as we go forward, there could be one policy rather than both of us getting two, and we can drive down the cost. If you have one situation where some social or some say inmate health information gets out or something like that's a lot of zeros at the end of that lawsuit. So we wanted to be able to at least make sure that we're protected, especially in this age of cyber attacks. And they're going after counties and municipalities and things like that. So I just, if there was any questions about that, let me know. But you can look over the document, and George Ryan Jr. is here to answer any and all questions relating to this, even down to the fine print he's ready for. I'm just pulling your chain. But the total premium is $6,100 a year. And I guess, the health department alone was, a little more than half of that, I believe, John, wasn't it? That's a head nod. I'm pretty close. So, and we have many more terminals than they have over there. So it kind of tells you how we're driving down the cost. Next year when we go to renewal, maybe we can combine this and we both spend less money. So I was going to throw it out to the committee. We had talked about it. We had a head nod to proceed and get the price. And so our limits are $1 million here, and then there are also, each claim coverage that goes out. But beyond that, it would be, if you think we should go that route, it'd be a motion in a second, then any discussion. So, Mr. Vickery.
So moved. So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Vickery, second by Mr. Sirois for the cyber insurance policy.
It would go into effect August 1st because we'd have to go to full board next. So that would be the general gist of it.
And then the amount of the, in the motion is 6,100?
Yeah, 6133.
6,133.
You can
Okay.
include that in the motion.
Right?
You can include
Yes,
that
I think
in
we
the
should,
motion.
yeah. Any other discussion? Ms. Weber?
Yeah, I just noticed on the material it says March to March, but that'll just get changed.
That will get changed, yes.
Any other questions or discussion? Bubba, roll call vote.
Mr. Legess.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy. Mr. Searoy.
Aye.
Ms. Weber. Mr. Payton. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
County Treasurer. Can I go ahead and get the combined?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll need a motion to combine the County Treasurer's report for May 2017. Sure. I can just get a motion in a second. And we can discuss it. Okay, County Treasurer report for May 2017, the County Collector's report for May 2017, and the monthly resolutions for July 2017. Motion by Mr. Washington, seconded by Mr. Payton, and we'll have discussion.
Well, I just wanted to let you know that on the collector's report, you see there's a negative $203,000 balance. And I wanted to point that out. That was just me being a little overzealous, pushing money into the money market fund. So that was cured 6 hours, but it fell at the end of the month. So just trying to get more interest on our money, and I think I got a little ahead of myself. So, so the collection duties are going well.
Let me take a vote.
Oh, sorry.
Since we got a motion and a second, this will be a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Second, or opposed? Motion carried. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, Andy, do you have my slide presentation? No, I'm just teasing. Anyway.
See, now, retribution will be swift.
I just want to talk about a couple things. Money's coming in. We're about 85 million. Distribution is going to be between the 5th and the 7th. Bruce Clark and I and Eric Blair are working on streamlining the mobile home process. We'll continue to work through that, and we'll come to the board when we have more info. Mobile home bills will go out, I'm hoping, by the end of next week, at the same time as distribution. The big thing that I want to talk to everybody about is CoreLogic, who is the largest escrow agent in the country. They are responsible for about 6,550 parcels in our county. Was late making their payment, and I have engaged Jim Rose people who have been great. They owe us 1.5% interest on $11,800,000, which is about $177,000 interest payment. They deposited, just so you have a quick briefer on what's going on, they deposited the money on June 14th, but despite repeated attempts from us, never were able to get us a file till 3 days after the due date. So while the money was there, there was no tie of where that money went. They seem to think that that's fulfilling their obligation. Clearly, it's not. If one of you deposited money in the account and then came to pay your taxes 3 days late and said, oh, by the way, I deposited it 2 weeks ago, here's my bill, you would be late. So we intend to fight vigorously and get the money that's due this county. That's a significant amount of money. I see a lot of people come to the office who can barely pay their tax and pay their 1.5% late fee. So I feel very strongly about this. We fielded major amounts of phone calls from people who had their taxes escrowed and still showed a late payment. Those people don't obviously have a legal obligation to pay that. That's the escrow agent's responsibility. So I met with Jim's people a couple times right before this meeting. CoreLogic seems to want to solve this issue very quickly, and from where I come from, they could solve it by the end of the day by writing a check. So I plan with Jim's people to continue to hold steady on principle, and hopefully we'll have a resolution in the next week, maybe, and I'll come to you with that. I'm trying to think. I think that's really where we're at. The treasurer's office, which I would be remiss if I didn't mention the amount of work that my staff is putting in. They're incredible, and we couldn't do it without them. And I know that everybody probably gets tired of hearing me say the idea of being penny wise and pound foolish. This incident is exactly why we need proper staffing, because you can identify these things, you can stay on top of them, and now we can go recoup our fine. I guess lastly, I should talk, since I'm on the topic of fines. I've had a couple phone calls with hotel, motel operators in town who have been late with their tax in the past. And I've made it very clear via a letter and phone calls that there will be no more grace period. The taxes are collected on our behalf. They're money that's owed to us, that's already been paid by the consumer to the hotel, and that from this point forward, if you're late, you will be fined the statutory amount, which is $500 for the first 30 days, $1,500 plus the $500 for 30 days after, and so forth and so on. I think I made my point clear. We'll see if it sunk in when the tax returns start coming in on a monthly basis. Any questions?
I just had one, Nick. I thought there would be more problems with congestion downstairs paying the taxes. Did more people, can you tell if more people went to their financial institutions or not?
I think, I don't know, Mike, exactly, because I haven't looked year over year. I look at what financial institutions have done for us, and I got to be honest with you, it's just incredible.
Oh, yeah.
The amount of help.
No doubt
Let's,
about it.
for instance, Homestar is our largest collector, and they may bring in $9 million. That's a significant chunk of traffic that they don't bring in, that they don't bring here. What I was able to do, which I really kind of enjoyed, the last 2 days of collection, I stood at the assessor's counter, which they were grateful enough to let me have some space, and hand wrote receipts for checks. And so what would happen is you'd have 100 people in the line, 25 people would have checks because it's heavily weighted toward cash at the end. But you were able to take those people out of the line and in 5 minutes process 25 people. Just check the tax bill, check the check, sign the receipt, here you go. And then go ahead and put them in the system later. But it helped the congestion. Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of things. I think we've tried to tell people, hey, if you can go to a drive-through and put your bill in a drive-through, it's so much easier.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, we have large guys that come in that have 25 parcels, and it's a little more difficult. But yeah, I guess I'm pleased at as efficient as it did run downstairs, and you know, hats off to Bruce and Eric for, you know, tolerating the disturbance, but I think it was a lot better than I had anticipated it would be. So the people seem to really like the idea that everything's together, because specifically if you're talking to an elderly taxpayer and you're looking at their bill and you see that they don't have they're telling you their bills are high, and you're looking at their bill and you see they don't have a senior exemption, you know, before they write a check, you can send them right next door to Eric's office and address that issue. And I think for taxpayers, that's efficient. I'm not in the habit of giving money away, but if they're, you know, if they're entitled to it, you know, that's where you want them to go. And so it was quick, and Eric's staff was very efficient in terms of dealing with those people. And we did have a few issues online, but I mean, nothing really to speak of. We're still getting collections in. I'm really pleased with the way things went. I was obviously very nervous being the first time. I didn't want to screw anything up. I know we need money. So we have money. There's probably right now in our tax collection account, 72 million. And then I'll bring it in from the other banks. But I did push it off to a money market account that we were able to get the whopping 0.75% interest. But if you can put 50 million in there and leave it for 30 days or near that, you know, it's money we didn't have. And I'll continue to, I have some banks coming in this week to talk about trying to get nearer to 1%. So that's that.
I did notice too that the second installment, there's no grace period for seniors.
There is no grace period for seniors, and here's my plan. There's no grace period for seniors because there's no statutory grace period for seniors.
Okay.
Mark and I believe Nick, the previous administrations, both allowed a week grace period for seniors. I don't find any indication in the statute that that's legal. I think, though, there is a problem always disseminating information. We saw that with putting the new office on the radio and the newspaper, social media. Still, people don't get that information. So I will treat those senior extensions on a case-by-case basis this year because I don't want to penalize anybody who didn't get the message. I put it very clearly on the bill that said it's the due date for everyone. I don't want to hurt seniors, but by the same token, if the statute doesn't allow for it, I can't allow for it. So,
On behalf of George Washington, I thank you.
thanks, George.
Oh, we have another question, Mrs. Weber.
Oh, sorry.
I really was impressed with the service also. I just wonder if the privacy was fine, though. They were kind of squinched together. So there was a little concern because in your other office, they were kind of spread out. So
The privacy issue really specifically deals with Bruce Clark's vital records department. That's really the private. I mean, the tax, it's nice to have some privacy when you're paying your taxes, but clearly taxes aren't private. But Bruce's area is of, there's a privacy concern at the vital records counter. And Bruce and I and Dan stayed in contact during that time. And there was a couple times that we modified some issues to deal with what we thought was better. We had a lot of stanchions out there, and I don't know that we ever needed what we had, but I don't think it was, I think all in all it was okay. I mean, we'll do some things different next year, tweak it, but yeah, I think it was good.
But at the counter, actually at the counter, people did feel they were in their little secure area here, even though, you know, it's a little bit tighter.
They did. It's tight. It's tight. And the girls remind me often that it's tight in there. But we're trying to do the best with what we have. And you dropping off candy is helpful. So keep dropping the candy off. I love it.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay. Mr. McCarty.
Is George's hearing aid?
It's a train.
No, there's a high pitched squeal.
I don't hear it.
Oh.
Hey, there goes your motion to adjourn. He's three.
I hear it.
You want it down there?
No, he's good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can hear it now. They're all up.
Oh, the three's on.
You're three, aren't you? You gotta go in. Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Good morning. Up first are the monthly report, sales tax, use tax, income tax, inmate Ben Riddle. One thing, I put sales tax on top. Excuse me, to remind me, we had a hiccup this month with sales tax that we haven't seen in 4 or 5 months here, 6 months. We'll keep an eye on. Hopefully that's a 1 month issue and not something new. So it's something I wanted to make sure the committee was aware of. On the page behind the front page where it breaks it down into the 2 types of tax that we receive, it was in the county-wide portion, not in the county sales tax area. That actually went up. So something we'll keep an eye on. But I wanted to bring it to your attention because it was kind of broke trend of what we've been seeing anyway. So we'll keep an eye out on that. I'll keep going unless there's any questions. If there's no questions on the regular tax reports, revenue items that we look at, the very last page is an update cash flow analysis through yesterday. So it takes into account at least getting through July. The next step we'll go through the rest of the year. With the not only the July distribution, but also the September distribution and the payoff of the TAWs and the timing of our bond payments and things toward the end of the year. So this is an update. You can see because of the early distribution of $3 million that we did pay down a considerable amount of our accounts payable here recently. So the amount of calls and emails and communications from our vendors should start to slow down for everyone and ourselves included. But we still have, some out there that we're working on. And for July, we'll have a TAW payment as well as the short-term highway borrowing repayment to work on. And then we'll continue to pay off as many claims as we can, as well as balancing the cash, through July, August as we get into September with the other distributions. So just wanted to give you an update. We'll move that forward here for next month, but I wanted to bring that to you. I don't know if there's any questions on that or not. We did receive. Mr. Leary has something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any significant change in the receivables from the state?
Yes, I was just getting ready to say we did receive 2 months of grant and aid, probation grant and aid. It was August and September. I believe that was early June. I'm trying to remember. We still have, there's still quite a few months out, obviously. It seems like income tax is hovering and staying about 2 months out the way they're doing it right now. It hasn't expanded to 3 or more. So we'll see on the grant and aid. As far as timing, we did get 2 months. I believe it was early June when that showed up. We just hit both the financial reports and cash flow there. So If I may preface, before we get into the budget amendment, I know a lot of the board members and, from my understanding, department heads did look at, you know, the projections and things. I just want to let the board members know, you know, that each and every revenue line in the general fund is taken into account with the accruals. So when you do and take the accruals in, it takes into account the total responsibility for like grant and aid, for example, and takes out when the timing of those payments actually hit. So with what we've gone through in the last 5 or 6 years and losing $8 million, you know, you pretty much have to take the current information and plug it in. And unfortunately, we'd love to get back to the point where normal trend and things like CPI actually will begin to work for us. But with what we've been through right now, taking it right here, right now, what we know, you can see sales tax, for example, you think you're on a trend and then it changes on you. And that's what we've been through the last 5 or 6 years. So that's what's built into this. And then each and every department head had a chance to input. And I'm pretty sure that everybody did input on their projections they received. Their projections, they had a chance to change them, provide input as well, so that we gathered the best information we could for the projection for the fiscal year end, and plugged everything in on an accrual basis to reflect in these reports. And then the budget amendment is built, worked with Chairman Wheeler and Vice Chair Lear on building the amendment as they communicated out to everyone as well. So I just wanted to preface what was done and what's built into the information that you have before you. And then, Andy, do you want to walk through the presentation then?
For that and all the hard work that it's taken, roughly 3 or 4 months to get to this point of being able to accurately present the budget amendments and then the basis for a 3-year financial plan. The 3-year financial plan portion, I guess a little bit of history. Before I start, when we did a budget last year, we prepared the budget because it was the actual worst case scenario. We were at historically low revenue numbers, and we had to budget for what we saw as it was happening. At that same time, we started to receive DHS detainees. And so we knew at the right as that budget was adopted that we would have to come to this point and reassess what that business model looked like. So you don't do that in a month or two. You try to take a snapshot, you know, of a longer period of time to be able to predict revenues and expenses as they stand now, and then be able to stretch that out over 3 and 4 years based on in 2020, we no longer have access to outside capital. That's something this committee is very aware of, that outside infusion of cash in the form of TAWs are what keeps us afloat between tax cycles. So we may have a budget number, but then there's also a cash flow issue. So there are two things that sometimes compete with each other, if you will. So when we determined the type of budget amendments that we needed to make this year, it was based on having enough money in 2020 to survive and able to get through without that extra infusion of cash. Because frankly, if we didn't have the marshals and the DHS program, we wouldn't have the cash flow to get through those time periods. That is a reality of the situation. And you always have to remember, we have to take care of our own prisoners as well. So that's all figured into this whole, you know, mechanism. Where roughly 80% of revenue expense come out of those departments. Typically, you also have to keep in mind that there usually is no revenue that comes out of that department. So while we may be dealing with a bad situation of changes in sales tax and changes of the inmate counts over the past few years, as you'll see here in the financial sense, that provides the light at the end of the tunnel. So with that being said, I'll start to move into this a little bit. I'll just go off of the PowerPoint here. It's a little easier for me to see. So when you take a look at the general fund summary, this is like a little bit of you know, the overview of where we've been since 12 through now. We've experienced it in I guess emotional years off our life because it's been very stressful for everybody involved. It was a free fall and we never knew where the bottom was going to end. And we thought we might have hit the bottom, and we pretty much have with, you know, the aberration and sales tax this month, we hope is just a blip and we go back to what we think the new normal on that will be. But if you look at the budget that we adopted versus what we're going to propose here, we have to account for the new revenues that we're seeing, substantial, and the new expenses, because we all know nothing is free. So it took us a little while to get to this point because we wanted to be as accurate as we possibly could. So that's like a brief overview. And then the fund balance at the bottom is something that we're going to try to carry through, so we're able to keep an eye on that fund balance, as I'll show in a minute and explain more of. And Mr. Lee had spoke to that. It's the combination of our three funds that needs to be around zero for us to have access to outside capital. We will become credit worthy, if you will, if those are at or right around zero. So our credit rating, bond rating, if you will, that's dependent on those balances. And they also rate those after your year end. So you won't, if we get to that point in 18, we really won't be able to see that as a benefit until 19. I hope that makes sense the way I put that. So if this is basically the reason that we're here to do this and why we're able to do a lot of these things. And I just want to give you a snapshot. We budgeted $5.27 million for corrections revenue, and the current trend is based on the kind of a steady trend is 8.4, and it may be upwards of that with no guarantees ever on anything. But this is exactly what we're looking at as far as our projections throughout the rest of the year. So we have to account for that in this budget because it is providing us to be able to keep what we have and then be able to fill the massive hole that we have on the general fund side. So I'll just move past this. We'll get into more detail as we move along. So now this is the fund balances and the highway payback, because we always have to keep in mind that we owe highway $3.5 million. And a couple years from now, they won't have enough money to handle the projects that they have on tap, roads, bridges, etc. And so we have to start making them whole again. We have that, well, responsibility and mandate to pay them back. Now, we'll see that some of those numbers can fluctuate a little bit, but they have definite needs. And I've spoken with Mark Rogers about, you know, what do we have to do and what's your timeline? So we want to make sure that we're not leaving him short at any point. We also have the cash situation that we have to deal with between the tax cycles. So we're really juggling a lot here, and none of this, what we're going to talk about, is including any other increases beyond our predictable step increases that we have built into some of our labor contracts and some few things on utilities. But we're projecting this out for 3 years based on really where we're at right now. We know what we have to have in 2020. Okay, that is a known. But what happens between now and then, there are some unknowns. So we had to try to account for as much of that as possible on the front end. All right. Now, again, these are the three fund balances. You know, I do want to back up one step here. When we look at 2015, we were at a total fund balance of 4.5, that last line in yellow. Between 2015 and 16, we actually got our pension fund and our tort fund out from being underwater. So that's why you'll see a total negative fund balance of 4.0 between all three, because we made substantial progress there. And that will continue going forward because, again, all three add up to the magic number that we need. So I'll move forward again. Now, when you look at 17, you're looking at the end of 17, I'm starting with a premise that we have to have $1.2 million back to fill in the hole every single year. That is not a nice to have, that's an absolute must have in order for us to make this work. So that I'm going to be very, and I think the committee should be very inflexible on that number. We have to have it. It's not like, oh, well, we can just push this out until 2030. That's not even possible because we won't have the cash flow to get there. It will require austerity like grease. I mean, it will be in order for us to function with the type of cash flow without doing what we're doing. So when I say this, it's not just a statement, it's an actual has to happen. See, tort fund starts to gain water, pension fund. So I will draw attention to, first of all, this number in 2019. If things work out to where they possibly could, because again, we have some things to work through as far as our elections, allocations and things like that. We possibly could be above that mark at the end of 2019. So eligible for TAWs in 2020. Now, I am not absolutely for sure on that. So this part of a 3-year projection we're going to kind of work on over the next month, and I'll come back and report on that because there's some legalities involved that we have to really vet as far as the what we're talking about with elections and that access to that capital. But the last line on there, hopefully at the end of 2020, if everything lines up, we'll be able to only owe highway $400,000, which allows them to keep up on their projects. And that is, again, something that we absolutely have to do. So moving forward, I mean, you can kind of pick through that as much as you like, but the fund balances will continue to climb up in all three out of the hole. I am hoping by the end of 18 that negative 395, potentially if we get more revenue and costs are flat, we may be able to go out for TAWs sooner than that. So again, that's hope, but we have to make sure that 1.2 is there every single year to the good. If we spend it, this just pushes that out even further. And folks, we can't push it out past 2020. We don't even know if, DHS program is going to be here tomorrow, let alone if there's a change in the White House. So we have to make sure that we move on this while we can. So I'm just putting that out there. So again, I'll just, this is more like for your negotiation of the way we're presenting this. Pay attention to the FY17 budget column and then also the FY17 budget amendment column. It's just basically the third and the fifth column that you see there. That's just to help you negotiate so you don't get lost in the numbers because there's a lot of them. All right. Okay, moving forward. The first thing to draw attention to is our interfund debt reduction that's baked into the budget. Where our debt reduction is in the budget from now for the foreseeable future. It's not going to exist outside of that. So the $500,000 is still there. Okay, I just want to draw attention. That's not necessarily an amendment. The next thing is as it stands right now, our elections budget looks like it's going to be a little bit lower. We didn't spend as much. That may change later if the state decides not to send the grant that was associated with this. So right now we're going to assume like everything is the way that it is, and we will get that grant. If that doesn't, we will account for that in another way later. So let's see here. The planning non-grant line item, we projected out at about 272, so we're going to adjust that as well. Try to get, a budget isn't, necessarily perfection, but we definitely want to look at what do we really think is going on. Something we weren't able to do at the beginning of the budget year this year. Building and grounds, we know that our costs are up there. So that's, we're projecting around 718, and I think they will even be up more than that after some recent discussions with Brian, because I think we just lost around a $30,000 air unit, which is just lovely to wake up to in the morning. So it's things like that are, when people say, why were you over budget? Well, you can't predict these things, especially when you're limping along and not buying new. And preventative maintenance is chasing your tail every day. I mean, it's a real issue for us, and those costs over the years, and Mr. Tripp was here who would tell you that if you're not able to do PM on a lot of this equipment, these costs will continue to go up. And unfortunately, it's the situation we find ourselves in. So we'll be revisiting building and grounds more throughout the year. Health insurance, our budget number was taken before people made plan choices. That's where we believe that extra $100,000 comes in. So we're adjusting there as well. I'm going to drill down into that a little bit deeper, and maybe we might be able to see some savings on with HRA usage and things like that throughout the year. So this is something we haven't done on a visible format. We've always tried to account for it. The estimated expense variance, things like the $30,000, oh geez, $30,000 air handling unit, things like that pop up. It always happens. But what I can't have is at the end of the year, we project that we're going to have a $1.2 million to the good, and then all of a sudden we have $300,000 of bills show up, which always happens. And it's not through overspending, it's just things happen. So we put it into the budget as an amendment item so we can account for that at the end of the year. Because it is a known unknown, if you will, if that makes any sense. And again, the contingency is still in there. So we're baking this 1.3 as it stands right now into the budget, even though we know the 3 is going to go away. Central services, I'll draw attention to, even though we're running a little hot on that, that falls under the discretionary spending. I didn't want to adjust that, and talking with a lot of the board members, we don't want to encourage to spend more on discretionary stuff. Even though it may be a little bit over, hopefully it'll be just a little, and we'll capture that in the 300,000 on that side of things. So moving forward, capital development, this you may remember, and we'll talk a little bit more about the revolving loan fund in a minute. We had somebody we loaned money to, they paid it back. That was, I believe, $74,000, I believe was the number roughly. I can't remember exactly, but we had immediate need for that. When card readers went down out at the jail, we lost the battery backups. We just didn't want the cells opening up, so we had to buy all those new battery backups. We authorized that spending in that area. So we moved that over into capital development. And then some of the other move-related things that we have in there as well. So we had to up that as more of a reasonable prediction of where it's going to end up. Alrighty. And then the state's attorney's office. We were never able to meet with the previous state's attorney. We had to come up with a budget number that fit under that worst case scenario that we were dealing with when we created the budget. And so we thought it was fair to at least give the state's attorney what the previous state's attorney had in 2016. And that looks like it's going to fit within what they've got going there as well. So moving on. The public defender. We upped the public defender because we are holding arraignments out at the jail on the weekends, and that is a cost to have that public defender present. That was $6,000 that was approved. I believe it was approved by finance as well. It might have just went to criminal justice and they approved it, but I think finance did approve it as well. Maybe not. Well, they are here. Hopefully. So we need to account for that because it just has to happen. You can't have an arraignment without a public defender. It just can't happen. So that part is a minimal, I want to say it's not even an insurance policy. It's almost a mandate. Now we get into the sheriff's department. Looking at our budget, that 2.3 would have meant, I don't know, between 15 and 20 patrolmen gone. And that included the people that were at Enbridge, that were working those details where the revenue kind of washed out what the pay was. So we kind of looked at what we could do to try to keep as many people on the road. And we had conversations with the sheriff and obviously board members as well. With the new revenue and the new expense models and combining in what we want to keep on the road, can we keep current staffing levels the way they are and still achieve what we need to on the debt reduction that has to come out of this? And my conversations with the sheriff were that, yes, we can do it. And so this is where we're going to amend the budget based on doing just that, keeping staffing levels where they're at for as long as we can. And with the expense numbers that are coupled with corrections, it can happen that way. And so as we go through that, we were at 2.3 and now we'll be at 3.3 on patrol. Because again, we still have the same amount of people, but now there's no reimbursement for those people from the Enbridge project. So I hope that makes sense. Nobody left. We just now have to cover them out of the general fund, but there's revenue to cover them out of the correction savings. So this all works with the revenue level as it currently is and with the expenses the way that they're listed here on these amendments. And so we've talked with in small groups of board members, and believe me, at the end of this, questions, we'll run through it in detail if you like. And then the coroner, we know, because of, frankly, the state of emergency we have on the opioid deaths in this county, I believe we're second as far as in the state, might even be second or third as far as deaths per capita for people ODing. They're just not, it's not stopping, and we have to account for that cost because those autopsies are very expensive, and we have to be able to try to find out where the suppliers are and who's supplying it and the chemical signature, if you will, of the different opiates that they're consuming. So this just accounts for where it's at right now. I expect that to be higher too, unfortunately. It's awful. So again, that's all the amendments. So we are going from, the expenditures and the revenues. will be pretty close in line. But again, if that $300,000 is going away, I need another 200,000 in there to get the 1.2 every year. So that's why you will see the difference is not between budget and amendment. It's between expense and revenue. We have to have 1.2 every year. So you will see this as we go forward in future budget years. So let me see what we have there. So I'll take a pause right now. Is there any questions about any of those line items? I know we've talked about them before, but I want to make sure that, you know, we address anything up front. Okay. Please stop me if you do. So again, this is more like the summary, you know, looking back 15, 16, 17, and then there's our draft, and here's where we're ending up. So the big thing is look at that fund balance at the end of this budget year of that 3.6. That's general fund. Okay, we have to consider that the other two funds are going to be getting further above water as well. So we'll be able to be considerably improving our position, which is essential. So again, remember, we have a budget, and then we have a cash flow, and then we have the debt between the three different funds, tort, pension, and general. So we're balancing those three to try to get to the promised land, so to speak. So, Mr. Vickery?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy, what's driving the increase in the tort and pension?
It's the levy. The levy is set as such. So we could shift the levy around, but the end result would be the same. Because under tax caps, and you have to forgive me if I'm a little bit off on this because, you know, just learning about all these, but it's the total amount between all three is that we're capped outside of lawsuit judgments and things like that. So if we shifted it around and pushed it to the general fund, our total number really wouldn't change. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry, Steve.
It was also in tort savings in the insurance
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah.
The total package insurance. Correct. As well as, right, property tax as well, but that was a major change in tort.
And hopefully that continues. We're going to be looking at work comp here coming up as well to see if we could save some money in that area, and that'll come back to this committee in the future. That renews on Jan 1, but we have to take a look at that stuff a little bit early. There's other requirements to do so. So anyway, I'll move on then. This is just like that summary we talked about. There's a previous slide from Mr. Lee that had expense and revenue. This is something new that I asked Steve to produce because it's somewhat unfair to departments that don't generate revenue, but you still want to see those two lines together. And we have our expense and revenue for each one. You know, like if you look at administration, the reason that's up is because we're getting increased tax revenue, frankly, things we didn't expect. I believe the use tax and a couple of them were just like, well, hey, appreciate it, you know, because so much is bad news along those lines. I wish they'd send us the money they owe us, but I'm sure some of our debtors feel the same way at times when we stretch them out. So there is a mirror in our house. The revenue and expense, you know, we're trying to keep that in line. You know, everybody's doing, you know, pretty well, but the major thing was, you know, like if you're looking, you know, there's a couple out there that are concerned. We still don't have an analysis from the circuit clerk. I shouldn't say still, that sounds negative. We don't have an analysis from the circuit clerk because with the new law on the recog bonds for people that can't afford the bonds for lower offenses, nonviolent, there's no bond fees associated with that. So the revenue side of the circuit clerk's office will potentially be impacted. We just don't know what that is yet. It's fresh. So we'll have to, again, throughout the year, we're going to have to really account for that. Because as far as percentage, we can figure it out. We have, I think, an idea, but it's just so new, we don't have that number yet. Then we're looking at, you know, please, on your own time, you can see a lot of these revenue expense numbers. I'll just kind of flip through them. The big ones, you know, obviously are the sheriff and corrections. And we think we've got that nailed down a little bit as far as what we think we might see by the end of the year. So let me see, go through. There's the corner, revenue expense. So that's all I had as far as the amendments, and I guess open it up to any discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of revenue expense by department, obviously this could be impacted if there were either increases or decreases in our DHS detainees.
Yes, very much so. You know, we're seeing increased levels as we go along. I don't expect that to change. If it does, then we have to change with it.
We can do that at the end of the fiscal year.
We can do
probably.
that at ends of fiscal years, and you know you don't want to ebb and flow on a day's notice, you know, but you want to take a look at, like we did here. We looked at almost a half a year to build that model, you know, and then see exactly what it's looking like. We'll know. I don't expect them to go anywhere, but again, tomorrow's not promised. But I will say that, as I mentioned before, we're in this situation not because of lack of effort. It's because we saw reduced numbers out there before, and then we also saw the state decide to say keep $4 million in tax revenue we used to get. So that together put us in a hole. This is the way out. There are no other avenues out. Yeah.
Clearly, we could be impacted in terms of what happens with the state budget. Their situation could have an impact on us very negatively.
Extremely negatively, especially especially, I said especially, that's one of my pet peeves, did it to myself. We are not one of the people that would be exempted by this deal I just heard about on the radio today. Cook County, and it seems like almost everybody else might be exempt from a property tax freeze except counties. So I sent a message to our legislator saying it's nice to be special, but not in this case. We can't capture new construction or the CPI. That is a real problem for us, because I understand the thought process. You know, you want to limit government, and you know, we're about as limited as it gets. We got 1 people in certain offices, 2, 3 in others. I mean, we're running as lean as we can, and any leaner, it will absolutely affect the services that people get. So while I understand the mentality here, it has a real impact on what people get for what they pay. So.
Mr. Vickery.
Yes, I made a kind of a note here. In corrections on revenue expense, I see the budget for 17 is 8 million, but our estimated year-end cost is 10.2, but our budget amendment is 9.2.
Correct. And when we came up with the estimated year-end cost, it was through, as we had talked about, or Steve mentioned a little bit, we had conversations initially with the department heads on what they projected out for the rest of the year. That was the initial conversation. And then the follow-up conversation was, well, we can make this work with our number. This is what we need. And I said, this is what the county needs. And our discussions with the sheriff is this is what he can make work. And so his projection is his estimation on what he's going to be able to do for the end of the year. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, our estimate is 10.2, but we have an assurance we can do it at 9.2.
Correct. The estimate was really close to what the sheriff's estimate was, you know, based on, and you know, we everybody wants to leave themselves a little bit of room. We do too. That's what the $300,000 is leave ourselves a little bit of room. So as we looked at, okay, if we project this out, where do we have to be and where do we think we can be? You know, those were the conversations that we looked at. And that's what we had, and that's what the commitments we had.
Those expenditures include the cost of our own.
Oh, yes.
So
Oh,
that
yes.
that has to be factored in. Our own.
Our own.
In county, our own people that we have to
Yeah.
have. You know, that's in there too. You've got to take that into consideration, because that's something, if we didn't have that, we'd have to be paying out.
That number is roughly between $2 and $2.5 million a year, just for our own. So, you know, that's why if everything being told, you know, all costs included, if it was just our own there, that would be the drain.
I just noticed that variation. See,
sure.
Anybody else have any questions on the amendments? Yeah, we have to have a, on all the amendments, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Combine,
We're
combine.
gonna need, let me see here. We're gonna need a motion and a second to forward these budget amendments on to the full board. Mr. Washington with a motion. Mr. Vickery with a second. This will be a roll call vote.
I do have one statement. We are just doing the amendments. The 3-year plan is not part of this. You can't bind future boards. And we're going to massage that over the next month to make sure that that is a really good representation of where we're at. We have some things we have to look in as far as PTEL and other things. So I just want to mention that.
Okay, any other discussion on the amendments? We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please. You're on, aren't you? Oh, yeah.
Mr. Legess.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery. Mr. Hess. Mr. Mulcahy. Mr. Seroy. Ms. Weber. Mr. Payton. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. All right, the next item, I don't know what this is, but I guess it's some kind of recognition. Steve, do you have I had heard a rumor that I was supposed to take this off the agenda because she had a change of heart, but I guess that's not true. Yeah, okay, there we go. You want to do this guest one? You want to do this one?
No, I thought it was going to be there in the party. I'll go get it.
You want to do this one? Or back there or here?
Come on, Nicole, I'm doing bear shit. You gotta come on. Okay.
Hey, Andy, that's a very good job.
Well, quickly, we have something for her. Diane and I, our message got mixed up. But 14 years ago, over 14 years ago, I hired Nicole Bosch with a master's degree in accounting from the U of I. And a couple years later, as the story goes, she met my brother, and that's we ended up with the last name. But we've kept business and family separate, and she's been an integral part of the finance department from when we started with Workforce, GASB 34, all the way up to the current and our audit and CAFR and the award, such an integral part of that. And so many things behind the scenes that we present and talk about and what she's done, and it's just an invaluable asset that she's been. I gotta back up. I'm too. Oh, to see her. Oh, we gotta get in the camera. Picture
Your public demands to see you.
So we have a plaque that Diane is grabbing here real quick for her to have for her 14 years of service. And so I wanted the committee to know and show if anybody was ever involved with the Workforce as board members, you know the integral part that she was. So here's the plaque that represents the 14 years of service to the county.
Speech.
There's a reception up there too.
Okay. As Steve said, he did hire me out of college, and appreciative for the chance to work here and the opportunities I've had. I've worked with many board members, many department heads. We've been a real team in the finance department and gone through a lot in the 14 years. And working with Steve and Chris and Tracy now and Diane formerly, and many other people over time, and especially the administrative department, all the departments I've worked with on your grants. I've enjoyed all of it. It's not an easy decision, but I am looking forward to going to work for Bradley School District, and I hope to continue to see all of you. And thank you.
There is a reception upstairs, correct? In the finance department? Right after this meeting, there's a little cake and punch and reception to say goodbye to Nicole.
If I could, one last item, so everybody recognizes the new face that is taking over and training for Nicole's position is Chris Kerner. He is here. Chris, would you mind standing up? Chris is going to assume Nicole's responsibility. Chris started with us as an intern from ONU 10 years ago, has since graduated as a accounting degree, and has been an integral part as well in the finance department as he moved from intern to full-time accounting accountant. And so you'll know who Chris is now, a new face as well in here with us. So
He does have a clause that he cannot marry any of Steve's sisters.
Pretty sure their husbands do too.
You're all done. Okay, we're all done with finance. Next up is Sheriff Mike Downey.
Here we go.
Speed this along.
Michael,
Good morning.
you're on, buddy.
All right. I've got a couple things as far as the ICE update. We are through May, which is the halfway point, and I think some of the information that Steve passed out is fairly consistent with the information we have. And right now we are up. Our increased revenue is up $1.6 million from where it was last year. So those are good things. Our out-of-county numbers, just for your information, the number of U.S. Marshal inmates that we have totals 170. That includes the Northern District of Illinois, the Northern District of Indiana, and the Central District of Illinois. Today, our ICE number is 133. And that fluctuates from the standpoint of as the week progresses, we get up to around 150, 160, and then on Friday, detainees are bused to an airport in Gary where they are deported. And then the week starts over and our numbers continue to increase again. And then we also still have 20 inmates from Cook County, a small number. And we have the option now to kind of determine what inmates we take from Cook County. We're not getting their problem children anymore. We're getting the ones we want, and if we don't want them, we send them back. There was I would say a time where, call it desperation, call it whatever you want, where we were taking anybody and just dealing with them, and we don't have to do that as much anymore. So that's a good thing. In addition, although it's kind of off topic of ICE, our citations and our civil process numbers continue to increase, which I think is revenue that may not be reflected in some of the reports that you've seen. So those are all positives. So questions on ICE or any of those numbers? Secondly, our corrections vans. I asked last month about corrections vans, and I will ask again, as we have 4 09 corrections vans that right now have anywhere from 119,000 to 139,000 miles on them. We have 2 buses, a 20-passenger bus that's an 07 that has 84,000 miles on it, and a 23-passenger handicapped accessible bus that has 88,000 miles on it. That's an 05. Those buses are still workable. They're fine other than regular maintenance. We haven't seen anything problematic with them. We also have 2 2011 vans. One is currently in the shop. It's the one that broke down up at Sauk Village on 57 with ICE detainees in it. and that van has 145,000 miles on it, and then we have another 2011 van with 185,000 miles on it. So all told, all of our vans have a minimum of 119,000 miles on them. And as our transport reports that we provide to the Criminal Justice Committee, our transports are not decreasing, they are increasing. So obviously those are issues that affect us from the standpoint of safety, mainly for our officers, but also the inmates and the general public as well. You're providing an opportunity for something bad to happen when you're sitting disabled on a road with a bus or a van full of inmates. So I would ask that if we could purchase 2 new vans. The 2 vans that we got approved last year just got put into service. So those are 2 vans that obviously we will utilize probably a lot, especially to and from Chicago. So we will continue to accumulate miles. We are reimbursed mileage. We're reimbursed the officer's salary for those transports. But I would ask that we approve the purchase of 2 additional vans.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess, and I'm trying to kind of stick 2 things together here. We were talking about squads at one point as well, that we were going to look at. I think it was for 4th quarter this year, if I'm not correct. No?
They're ordered. They'll be here in July sometime.
They'll be here in July. But was there another order that we were doing again for squads, or does that take care of everything?
It takes care of everything this year.
Okay, everything this year. Because I was trying to figure out, with the actually we just amended the budget, so it's not accounted for at this point. On the expense side, is there? I know that there may be some hesitation too, but is there a way to do maybe board does 70, 30% comes out of seizure to help just kind of spread this out a little bit so we can get another van to help replace that? I'm trying to figure out a way to work between the 2 to get more in a shorter amount of time.
Well, the problem with utilizing seizure money is there's a number of problems with it, but most importantly, that money is to be used for drug issues, drug investigations. Can we do it legally? Yes, we can. However, remember, we are required, the Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board requires deputies to have a certain number of hours of training every year, and that's how we pay for our training out of that money. I just think using seizure money, because seizure money is like anything else. Once you use it, it's gone, and we'll never get it back. They're, in all likelihood, based on the seizure laws that are out there that they're trying to pass, we will never have another seizure of $1.6 million, of which we got, I don't know, 400,000 or 500,000, of which there's about $300,000 left. Because borrowing or using this money is much like borrowing from another fund, much like Bossert and Boyd did for the last 8 years. And I don't think we want to get into that habit, but that's just me.
Mr. Seroy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, how many transports do you guys do daily? Do you have a detail on that? You got 6 vans right now, right? With your 217s, your 211s, and your 29s. Well, you got 5 because you got 1 in the shop.
Right.
How many you do daily?
Well, how about monthly?
Monthly. Well,
Is that close enough?
well, yeah. Sometimes some days are worse than others when you only got 5.
Right. Well, and obviously they're limited on the weekends, so there's really not much on Saturdays and Sundays. So all these are
The only thing you do on Saturdays and Sundays would be if you had a juvenile detainee that you had to bring to court or back and forth, or is that?
Juvenile, hospital, those are mainly the 2 big ones. Somebody's watching live because I just got a text that said about 10 a day.
Okay, 10 a day.
I hope he works for us.
So you got 10 trips a day, and most of them are up north to Clark.
That's actually right. So 217 for the month divided by about 22 work days is 9.86. Well, pretty close.
Well, I know we had talked in public safety that if we could get through this fiscal year, that maybe at the beginning of next or at the end of this fiscal year, we could order them for next year's budget. And I'd still like to be able to stick to that plan if we can make these other ones work. And I know the miles scare you. The miles scare me too. But if your PM is pretty good, you know.
My what?
Your periodical maintenance.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Your maintenance on your vans are pretty good. I mean, and you guys keep a good eye on it. And sometimes
we do.
even a new vehicle will break down.
No doubt.
You know,
No
so
doubt about it.
I would just try to encourage you to at least maybe we can get to that next year's budget for the 2 new vans. If we can't make something else work, I'm just for the, you know what I'm trying to say, Sheriff, for the big picture of things. You know, I understand your situation, but that's just
I just would hate to see, and you know, our squad cars, which will be here in July, and those take about a week each to get ready. So, and then at this time next year, we're going to be asking you for 11 more. And I mean, that's just the cost of doing business. And the cost of doing business, and part of that business is the money that we have coming in for this program. And that's my own. I'd like to get the vans as soon as we can, but you guys hold the purse strings. So,
Mr. Hess.
Thank you, Sheriff. You have a template now for the new
To fit them?
fitting for the inside of it. Now
yeah, the fabrication.
the fabrication.
inside,
Now
yes,
you've got that done
we
and
do.
everything, so it wouldn't take as long to get the new ones.
No.
What is the approximate cost of them? Can you have a?
The
25.
cost, well, the cost of the van is about 25 or 26.
25.8,
And
and
then
I think it was 10,000 for the, according to the minutes.
So 2 would be roughly
Yeah, and that's
70,000.
less. That'll be less
Yeah, now
because
that
it's
you have a
already
template,
fabricated.
right.
Yes, it'll be about $4,000 or $5,000.
I'll go out on a limb and make a motion he gets them. It's you got to have something that's going to work.
Okay, we can take a motion in a second and then have more discussion. So you're making a motion to purchase the 2
To
vans?
purchase 2 more vans.
You want to lease them
For
or
the-
purchase them? We've leased them. We've leased these last 2 that we bought this year.
Okay.
Okay, change that to
Lease
lease.
with a purchase or option purchase at the end.
Well, the lease pays for them. They're ours when we're done.
Okay.
Yeah.
I make that motion then.
We'll need a second. Second by Mr. Vickery. Now we'll have some discussion. I had a hunch you'd be jumping in.
I'm the pay for it guy. So if we could, we might be able to look over the next, if this passes, look over for the next month where the funds could come from. I think it would probably be Q3. I'm estimating when they would show up. Potentially, you have to get them on order. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I think when I asked last time, I had a short time period that we couldn't get in right away, so it may be a couple months even now.
Okay. So we might, just initial thoughts, I'll take a look at, we're going to talk about revolving loan in a little bit. I think that initial downstroke on the lease was what, 20 grand? For I can't remember exactly what that was. We'll have to look into what that initial payment is. But we might be able to work for it for the end of the year. Do you remember, Mr. Hess? Yeah. Yeah, that number sticks in my head, so we'd have to check that out. And we might be able to make it work under those auspices, but I know obviously it's not going to be the full amount for the vans. So, and what is that? I think it's a 3-year lease. I think they come up with.
I think they're 3 or 4.
3 or 4. There's 4. Okay, there's 4. So if, as long as we can find the money somewhere, I don't have a problem moving it forward. We just have to find out where it's going to come from. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's a state bid price, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't gonna go searching. Yeah. We'll find one, or two, or three.
I don't know if this has any bearing or not, but I noticed at the Bradley Village Board meeting, I think it was 3 new squad cars, and they went through a state purchase, and they turned around and went to Court Street Ford, and to keep the money local, they honored the.
That's where we got our last 2 vans.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, we'll try to keep it local when we can.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that we need to have these vans and have them on the road, because I don't personally want to do anything that would jeopardize the ICE program, and I imagine most of these are used for ICE detainees.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, that's where we're going the most now.
Yeah. So, go.
You know, in criminal justice, when the Tahoes were getting over the 100,000 miles, we saw the report with the maintenance.
Yeah, I
You know,
understand that part too. Yeah.
You know, and that's a big factor for the. So.
Okay. Do we have any further?
I will
Go ahead.
chime in because I can see this is going. I'm not against getting vans.
No, we understand that. You just want to put it in there.
I just would rather pay for them when we can afford them. That's all I'm saying, Sheriff. And if this committee thinks we can pay for them, I will go along with what the committee thinks.
Yeah, and I think if it's over a 3-4 year period, the amount of money we would need for this year is considerably less.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think
Between 10 and 20.
it behooves us to go ahead and okay this, and then figure out where we can get the money to make the lease payment. Okay, so any other discussion? All right, so the motion, and we have a second, correct? Is to lease 2 new vans. And we'll have a roll call. Oops.
Mr. Legess.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery. Mr. Hess. Mr. Mulcahy. Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Ms. Weber. Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next on my portion of the agenda is to declare wave runners surplus. We have 2 wave runners and a boat trailer which carries the wave runners. These are 2004 Polaris wave runners that were used back in the day for River Patrol. River Patrol, from the county standpoint, has been non-existent for quite some time. These wave runners we pay every year to winterize and then open them up just in case we may need one. And I just feel at this point there's no sense in having them and paying $1,000 a year to maintain something we're not using. So they are 2004 wave runners. Actually, one of them runs very well. One of them does not anyway. So, and there's been no reason to fix it just because we haven't, we had one that ran, so we weren't real concerned about the second one. But I would like to declare them surplus and get rid of them. One less thing we have to.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Vickery, second by Mr. Mulcahy to declare the 2 wave runners surplus. Any other discussion?
Don't want to have wave runner rentals down at the
with a badge and a light and siren on them? Yeah.
It might give the inmates something to do on the weekend. All right, we have a motion and a second. This can be a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
I have a couple more things just for the board's information. Some of you may be aware, and I think did Jim leave? The state of Illinois passed Senate Bill 2034, which is the Bail Reform Act of 2017. Basically, what the Bail Reform Act does is it categorizes offenses into violent and nonviolent. And those nonviolent offenders are going to get out of jail a lot faster than they do now as far as their bonds and all that, without going into a whole lot of explanation about what the bond's going to be. That's all up to the judges. There was some question initially as to when this took place, or when this was enacted. Initially, it was thought it was to be enacted immediately. However, we've got clarification that it really starts on January 1st of 2018. However, some judges across the state, including ours, are starting this process now. So just a heads up when we're talking about all these projections, what's going to happen, and I hate to say this about people, but being around here for 30 years in the criminal justice system and seeing the same customers, we know that a lot of repeat offenders are going to be coming back. So when somebody gets released from jail without posting a nickel, they're going to get rearrested in all likelihood. And that places a burden on the entire criminal justice system from the standpoint of the police to rearrest, corrections to process again, the courts, the state's attorney, the public defender, probation, and the circuit clerk. And I don't know if I left anybody out. If I did, I apologize.
Booking fees.
Well, those are,
Yeah.
I mean, if they can't post bond, they can't pay booking fees. So that's kind of a wash. But so that is going to be a burden. And you're going to have all these departments here saying, you know, we need more people because of all this. So, you know, again, our state legislature makes up rules without a whole lot of research on it, because people in Cook County wanted people out of jail is basically where this came from. So just information on that. If there's no questions, I'll move on.
I have just a question. It will not manifest unless people are locals being in jail at any one time, because for the most part, you estimate that, you know, we were looking at the cost associated with housing our own.
Right.
I was going to ask a question, or would we see a reduction based on this new law?
Well, I don't. We may see a slight reduction, but the issue now is we have been proactive in this by meeting with the state's attorney's office and saying, this guy's been in jail for 3 months and he's got a $100 bond. It doesn't make any sense to keep him in jail. So we've already really done this on our own between the sheriff's office and the state's attorney's office to do that. So will it change a little bit? Yeah, because it's going to affect more people. Because we're, you know, again, there's a lot of discretion in saying, hey, this guy has been here so long, you know. So, but it's a lot of still working together, which we continue to do to try to keep our costs down as much as we can. So, only time will tell, I guess. I mentioned the cars that were delayed. They'll be here sometime in July. I don't know if the entire board knows or the entire committee knows that we had a weather-related incident a couple weekends ago where lightning has done some damage to some equipment, both 911 and ours down at the old jail, including the tower, some things on the tower that had to be done. So you may see some bills from that. I know that Brian has turned it over to insurance, and we're dealing with that as well. So we're hoping to get everything through insurance, but it was significant. And between Tammy Peterson and her staff and Trent Bukowski and Josh, our other IT guy, they did tremendous work to kind of really get the county back up and running, actually on Father's Day. So credit to them. So, and lastly, I have in my hand here a paper, it's a summons through civil process, and it was issued by the county. So it went through the state's attorney's office, so we don't get paid to serve it. This paper service is to one of your colleagues who I know that didn't file his economic interest form. We have attempted, this summons was issued on 6/7 of 17. We received it on 6/8. We tried to serve it on 6/11, 6/14, 6/20, and 6/22 at 4 different times of the day. Some of those times in the day we knew he was home, and he's basically avoiding service. Now this is a county board member who is supposed to be a purveyor of the taxpayer money, and he has a bigger burden on our department than our inmates, which is a sad state. And it's frustrating because here's a guy who's making financial decisions regarding our department. We can't serve him between not being able to serve him and arresting him on warrants. I mean, it's sad. It's really sad. But that burden on our department, because we don't get any reimbursement for that. You don't see those numbers in all these PowerPoints that you just saw. But this is what we're dealing with. So, and I mean, he's not the only one. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who are burdens on our system. They're just not county board members. So.
Mr. Lear.
Sheriff, to speak for the integrity of the board, I think it's important to say this board member has not been in attendance and has not been making any decisions that have been a part of what the board's decision making has made.
It's debatable, but I understand. But he has made some decisions while he was still a burden on our system.
Mrs. Weber.
I think I was hearing a message about subpoenas to your officers. That maybe you thought that wasn't necessary. Is that true? Or?
We did get that between the state's attorney's office. We did get that worked out.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's just a matter of talking through it, what the right process is. We're still not getting paid for it, but it's made the process a little bit easier for us. So it's worked out for everybody.
Yeah, I thought it would be good to work it out.
Right.
Sheriff, I just had a question on correctional officers. How many do we have? A lot that are in, getting training.
We have nobody at correctional officer basic at this point. They don't do correctional officer basic during the summer for obvious reasons. I think vacations basically. We have sent 12, I think, through the first part of the year. I think there'll be a couple other trainings that we'll have to send some people to later in the year, September, October.
Okay, because I know in talking to Chad, the count for correctional officers is way down.
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
We got 10 or so on medical.
Some by their choice, some by ours.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yep.
We're on to other business.
All right, well, I'll just jump in. Just want to tie up one thing the sheriff said. That lightning hit at the courthouse, blew a hole in the dome on one of the fixtures in the metal, actually the copper. So we're kind of checking with the historic requirements there. Do we have to replace or can we patch? Because the patch won't look like the actual corner piece that's way up on top of the dome. So we want to make sure that we don't kick that hornet's nest when we try to solve that problem, but we can't let water pour into the dome either. So just the gift that keeps giving. I just want to mention that to the committee, that there may be a financial commitment to this. It could be, I think patch was 10 grand and the actual recreating the actual thing was like 20. So we'll get back to you with a firm number, but we want to look into what that means on the front end. Yeah, that's lightning. So anyway, moving on to the NIMEC aggregation bid in your packet. I just wanted to comment on this because the board authorizes me to go out and do the bid, and so do a lot of the other smaller communities within the county. We were able to secure the ComEd rate is 7.122. That was their new rate that was just accepted. We secured 6.95 for 3 years, which is one of the lowest in the state. We were able to leverage this type of a program to benefit a lot of the citizens. You may have heard on the radio, Bradley wasn't able to do it. They didn't get a good number. We were able to leverage, well, for some reason, we're better than others in this aspect through various reasons. So I took advantage of the 3 year now because we're expecting ComEd to go up as high as 7.5, 7.6 by the end of that 3 year period. So that'll be substantial. It's also should be noted that it's only the new rate we've got is only 1.9% higher than what we did 3 years ago. So I think we're doing pretty good work for the citizens of the county that are able to participate. So that's more informational. Moving on to the any questions, by the way, sorry. Moving on to the revolving loan fund write-off. This committee may be aware Last year, we were notified that the state Department of Commerce was no longer going to have the revolving loan fund program, and they basically wrote us a letter and said, do what you want with the money. So to me, that meant a couple of things. You know, when I found out about this in January, February, roughly, was to see what loans were outstanding, because we had to settle that situation. You know, that's part of the business of closing out revolving loan, and then we could figure out, as I mentioned, maybe part of it can go to get the you know, different things, because we have needs that we have to take care of as far as known and unknown that come up. So the one thing we did, we got the 74 roughly from the incubator, if you will, out of Chicago. Got that money back. There was a couple other things I had to address. You may remember we wrote off the doctors one last year sometime, I believe. We wrote that off. We granted for the Mechanic Street project out in Moments to do that. That was part of the revolving loan fund at the time. So there's a couple of things that I need to clear up as far as the business. The first one is the Pembroke Township was awarded $45,654.36 on April 29th, 2011 for building repairs and purchase of furniture and equipment for the Power Center. I almost put now defunct. I don't know if it was ever funked, if you will. I don't know if it ever had anything going. We've never received a payment, and the balance is still owed. The furniture and the equipment purchased with the loan was also offered as collateral on the loan. That's $45,000 worth of 2011 furniture and 2011 computers, if you will. There's no value there whatsoever for us to pursue this. So I'm asking the committee, we need to do like we did with the doctor's office situation, and we need to write this off to get this off of the books. So that separately, I need a motion to approve that, and then a second, and then we can talk about it if you have any questions.
Are you making a motion, George? Motion by Mr. Washington, second by Mr. Vickery to write off the revolving loan for Pembroke Township?
Yep, $45,654.36.
Okay, you got that? Okay.
Any discussion, any questions? That need to be a roll call? I believe so.
Yeah, we're not spending money. Roll call. In a way, we're not spending money. Let's do a roll call.
Just in case.
Yeah, we'll do a roll call just in case.
Aye. Mr. Legess?
Aye.
Mr. Washington? Mr. Vickery? Mr. Hess? Mr. Mulcahy? Mr. Seroy? Ms. Weber? Mr. Payton? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Go ahead, Andy.
By the way, the doctor's office was Exceptional Healthcare. I just see the name here, if that rings a bell. The next issue, or the final one we need to tie up, was Main Street Moments. We granted them $50,000, or excuse me, yeah, we granted them $50,000 on December 10th, 2009 to create their own loan program or provide loans for improvements to the downtown buildings. The funds were to be repaid in 2015 or an extension granted to continue the program. So I had some conversations with Main Street Moments. Mr. Vickery came out and we had sat down and talked to them, and they've got that money tied up into micro loans of their own. And we have to settle our books, so to speak, on this revolving loan fund. So the discussion I had with them is to offer them to call that a grant, much like we did for the Mechanic Street project. I believe in helping that organization do the facade improvements and the things that they've got going on within Moments. I think it's a good use of the money. Sure, we could use it over here, but that would actually pull the rug out from underneath that organization when the money's still in play with their own microloans. So my recommendation to this committee would be to term that a full-on grant to get our books settled, and then we can decide what we want to do with the rest of the revolving loan fund money and where we want to house that. My recommendation would be contingency for right now. But yeah, that's so that I'm asking for a motion in a second on that to move that one forward.
We have a motion by Mr. Vickery, seconded by Mr. Washington, and are we changing this to make it a grant?
We're going to call it a grant that's not to be repaid, yeah.
Okay, the motion would be to change the revolving loan to a grant that would not need to be repaid.
Correct.
And the waiver what? Yeah, that's what I just said. Didn't
Yeah, I think you said that.
I? Thank you, Andy.
Maybe
We have a motion and a second.
Maybe not into the microphone, but yeah, you
We
said
have a motion and motion and a second. Mrs. Weber.
Hold on, just a moment.
Main Street is going to react to the people they've given loans to. Are they becoming grants too? Is there a discussion on that? Or are they paying it back to Main Street?
There was discussion on that. The way that their program is set up from the federal government, because they had matching funds from the Fed, it does need to remain as the loan program. Some of those loans were bad too. It's always as we have learned, it's always somewhat of a gamble when you do these types of microloans. Theirs are more micro than ours, obviously. So what they have still in play is still valuable to the community, and they are collecting on those. So I'm also trying to help them figure out, they didn't take advantage of their whole match that they could have. So we're trying to figure out how to maybe let them go back to the federal government if possible, to get more of a match. So yeah, they won't call those grants. It's in their best interest not to do so.
Yes, I just wondered.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Mr. Vickery?
Just a little point of information on that. This was a matching fund thing that they got 99,000 from the federal government, and we put up 50 in the revolving loan fund. It's CDAP money, number one. It wasn't taxpayer. Well, it's taxpayer
Yeah,
money,
but not
county
I know.
taxpayer
County,
money.
yeah.
And so, and it has enhanced the downtown area, and they do have quite a rigorous process to get a loan. It's not something that's very simple, but they do have a rigorous process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? We didn't have a vote, did we?
No, motion is second. We didn't vote on
And
this.
this will be a roll call too.
Mr. Legess.
Aye.
Mr. Washington. Mr. Vickery. Mr. Hess. Mr. Mulcahy. Mr. Seroy. Ms. Weber. Mr. Payton. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Andy, you have anything else?
Oh, yeah, I apologize. It wasn't on my agenda. Just as an informational thing you'll see on the screen up there, you might have got it via email. At the full board, we're going to need to approve the audit. We realized that looking back through the minutes at the finance committee, when she was doing the minutes before this meeting, that we talked about the draft, but we never approved it. So things kind of go sideways sometimes during a meeting, and you miss some things. So we posted it. It's out there. We've all received this link as board members, so we're just going to bring it forward to the full board meeting to be adopted at the full board meeting on the 11th. So that was more advisory, nothing to do right now, just to let you know. Maybe check it out, see if you can formulate some questions before now and then. And everybody's really heard the gist of what was going on in the audit already.
Mr. Vickery?
I'm trying to recall here, did we have a presentation at the full board?
No, we did not. Now, yeah, we had the presentation at finance, which is
Finance,
traditionally
okay.
what usually happens.
Will we have a presentation at full board?
I hadn't considered it because we never really did that before. I don't think we just did it at finance. But again, I may be wrong on that. But I don't seem to. I could call our accountants and have them, their auditors, excuse me, and have them come in. If you think if that's appropriate,
It might be informative. I mean, not to make the board, meeting that much longer, but.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. Yeah. I'll get a hold of them.
Anything else?
That's all I got.
Okay. I would just like to thank all those that were involved in the 3-year projection. I know that took a lot of work. I think, Andy, you were involved, of course, and Steve was Steve McCarty, and I imagine Jake was too.
Yeah, he was. He was on the front end. Yeah.
So whoever, if I missed anybody, I'm sorry, but in my years here, I don't recall us going that far out and projecting what we're doing in it. It not only helps, the public see where we're going, but the department heads too can see what we're trying to do, and in that case, they can, be of assistance naturally to help us reach those goals. And all the ones that appeared before this committee today, I thank you for your input. I've been on the board a long time, and we've gone through some very tough periods, but I think now we're with the leadership we have, I think we're doing a good job of trying to get back to where we need to be in the shortest amount of time we can, which is, I think, a rare feat. If you looked at that revenue and expenses since, I believe, 2012, we were down $9 million in revenue, and at the same time, we eliminated $10 million in expenditures. That's a lot of work, and it's only made possible by department heads working with us, our partnerships as far as the employees and the union people. So we're still going to need all that participation to continue on and get where we want to get as soon as we can get there. So I thank you all for that. And I'll take a motion to adjourn. I've taught Mr. Mulcahy very well, but Mr. Hess is making the motion, seconded by Mr. Mulcahy. All in favor, say aye. Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.
Remind everybody.
Remind